Hello, everyone, and welcome to the last lecture of the semester. In this presentation, we're going to be summarizing some of the stuff that we've talked about this semester and trying to end on a positive note so that we can finish up the class knowing that we, as citizens of the United States, have things that we can do to make all of these problems that we've talked about a little bit better. So all hope isn't lost. What we can do to work towards a sustainable future. So, did this class scare you? I wouldn't be surprised if it did. In this class, we talked about things like overpopulation, water pollution, air pollution, solid and hazardous wastes. We talked about energy problems. We certainly have a lot of problems to face. I remember when I was in college, I took an animal ecology class from an internationally known eagle expert, Dr. Tom Dunstan. And I remember walking out of the final exam thinking, there are an awful lot of problems. And what am I, as this 22-year-old person, what can I do to make things better? And it was kind of disturbing. I don't want you to have that same experience finishing up my class. I want you to be aware that there are big problems that we've discussed this semester. But I also want to empower you to know that there are things that we can do to make things better. And if we can spread the word, if we can get other people to understand what these problems are, and if we can get everybody making little changes, we might just surprise ourselves how much good we can do here. So I want you to know that there are people who care about these issues, and there are things that we can do to take positive steps in order to face them. This is kind of cool. This is a report put out by Amnesty International. They surveyed people in 22 countries, 10,000, almost 11,000 people surveyed between the ages of 18 and 25. Which of the following most important issues facing the world and facing your country are you most concerned about? Up at the top were environmental issues, so climate change, pollution, loss of natural resources. And then when surveyed specifically about environmental issues that concerned people, global warming, ocean pollution, air pollution, deforestation. Okay, so these aren't just things that hippie biology teachers are talking about. These are things that people in general are concerned about. Okay, and what does that mean to us? What types of things do we do in order to make things better? Well, this was kind of an interesting graph I found. This is from the Nielsen Corporation. They are responsible for polling people. They're one of the big polling services that are out there. And they said, healthy for me and healthy for the world can be linked to top premium factors. So what types of things are people willing to pay more money for in order to get? So 49% of the people surveyed are willing to pay more money for high quality food that meets safety standards. So using foods that are hormone free, antibiotic free, things along those lines. People will pay more money for things that have superior performance or function. So again, same kind of idea here. 41% of people are willing to pay more money for things that are all natural, organic. Okay, so people are aware of the problems. People are willing to pay a little bit more money in order to get things that are important to them, that are responsible for solving some of these problems. And there are things that we can do too. So very early in the semester, we talked about what is sustainable living. Sustainable living is meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet the needs of them, meet their own needs. And that's really what we're talking about here, right? We're not saying that everybody has to wear hemp clothing and live in yurts and do drum circles every night. Okay? We have a right to be able to expect a certain quality of life, but we need to try to achieve this in such a way that we're not interfering with our children and our grandchildren and future generations from having the ability to meet their own needs. Okay? And this is in terms of living space, this is in terms of energy and resources and pollution. And the picture that you see here is actually a picture I took this past weekend at Ryerson Woods, and it shows an adult barred owl with an immature barred owl high up in a tree. And this was in a forest preserve, maybe 15 miles from campus, right? So you'd think a big suburban area, we can still meet our needs while having natural resources available for beautiful wildlife like these barred owls. So what does sustainable use of renewable resources mean? Hey, this means that we're using resources in such a way that we're taking them no faster than they can be replaced. So a good example of this is sustainable fishing. Sustainable fishing isn't when we go out to a lake or go out to the ocean and we catch all the fish. Okay? Sustainable fishing is when we catch enough fish that we can meet our needs, but there's enough fish stock remaining that they can reproduce and keep the population going. This could mean fish farming in such a way that we've got these ponds and lakes and we're growing the fish, but like when you're growing livestock, we talked about that earlier, they produce a lot of solid waste. Fish farming in such a way that you're not making too much fish waste that then can't be dealt with. So what can we as consumers do about this? Well, you can choose things like sustainable seafood sources. And a good example of this is the logo that you see in the lower left-hand corner here from the Marine Stewardship Council that certifies that particular fish or other seafood comes from a sustainable source. So I want to show you a quick little video that talks about the Marine Stewardship Council and what they do.
What does the MSC label mean? It means sustainable fish stocks. Fisheries are only Marine Stewardship Council certified if the stocks they fish are at sustainable levels, or if fishing does not hinder their recovery to sustainable levels. But how do you know the size of a fish stock? Almost all fish species exist in several places around the world, and different populations develop independently from one another. You therefore need to know exactly which population a fish has come from in order to determine if it has been fished sustainably. Scientists use research and data provided by fisheries to assess the health of the fish population. Based on all the available data, scientists calculate the health of the fish stock. However, this kind of data is not always available. Because data on fish stocks is sometimes unavailable or incomplete, fisheries that volunteer to be MSC certified may undergo new research to advance understanding of fish populations and improve their sustainability. The size of the fish population fluctuates. It not only depends on how many fish are being caught, but also on natural factors such as food availability. If a fish population declines, it does not necessarily mean that the level of fishing is unsustainable. If such a decline happens, MSC certified fisheries must make changes to help the populations recover. In the early 2000s, the New Zealand Western Hoki population declined significantly due to changes in their environment. In order to allow the fish population to return to a sustainable level, the MSC certified fishery greatly reduced its catches for several years and accepted short-term reductions in profits. This approach paid off. The Hoki population recovered and is back to healthy levels. So, when you see the blue MSC label on a product, you can be sure that the fish comes from a certified sustainable fishery. Choosing seafood with the MSC label helps to ensure healthy oceans for the future.
Okay. Here we go. And here's a picture I took a number of years ago from an Alaska cruise. of a fish processing plant in Alaska where boats would bring in wild caught salmon that is being fished sustainably to be processed and sent off to tables. Hey, another way of looking at the sustainable use of renewable resources is in paper and wood products. So choose wood and paper products that are sustainably harvested, meaning you don't have people going in and clear cutting an entire forest. While yes, you get the lumber, there are no plants left to anchor the soil and prevent soil erosion. And if there's no soil, you're not going to be able to regrow trees. So companies that harvest wood sustainably do things like not removing all the trees all at once. They use proper soil and water conservation methods. They're going to promote the recycling of wood and paper products. And here you can see from the Forest Stewardship Council, FSC, this is a group that certifies that wood products come from renewable resources. And this group also is very big into the recycling of paper. Another interesting thing that we could talk about is agroforestry. And agroforestry, as the name implies, agriculture, forestry, forests. Agroforestry is growing trees as a agriculture for products that they produce like fruits and nuts. It also can involve growing trees in addition to other plants. And a good example of this is coffee. So here you can see a slide that's going to show us a little bit about what's going on with shade-grown coffee. Now, the coffee plant evolved growing in the understory of forests. And here you can see on the far right-hand side that when you grow coffee beans, which are these, the shrubs down at the bottom here, in the understory of other plants, you can have up to, in this case, 243 bird species. So this is providing habitat for a variety of different birds. Many of those birds are going to do things like eating the insects that would live on the coffee plants, thus helping to protect them from parasitism. Unfortunately, the way many coffee plantations grow their coffee is by growing them in full sun. Yes, it's true, it gives the coffee more access to sunlight, so more photosynthesis, but it also greatly reduces the number of bird species. So in this study, they found only 61 species of birds growing among the sun-grown coffee. So simply by growing coffee with other trees, and by the way, these other trees can be fruit-bearing trees and nut-bearing trees that provide other products, there is a huge advantage to that. So when you are looking for coffee, here is the Smithsonian organization, which has a group that's involved with bird conservation. They certify certain coffees as being shade-grown coffees that are better for the environment and better for birds. So if you are a coffee aficionado, and I know we have a number of those in class, this is something that you'd want to think about. Because here's a picture I took when I was in Costa Rica a number of years ago. This is the side of a mountain. So we were on a road looking down, and then it went up the side of a mountain. So we were high looking down, but then the mountain was going up. You can see where they cleared the forest and are planting the coffee in these great big rows. This is sun-grown coffee. Another way of looking at the sustainable use of renewable resources is by limiting our dependence on renewable resources like aquifers. Now remember, an aquifer is groundwater. And yes, water cycles. But aquifers take an awfully long time to recharge, right? So if we pull up all the water out of the aquifer faster than it recharges, then it is not a renewable resource. So we want to try to limit our dependence on aquifers, which are not really renewable, at least not renewable very fast. So we talked about trying to have wastewater treatment plants and do that efficiently. So we're using the water that's going to be produced, or the wastewater that is produced. We can do things to limit our loss of water. So things like low flow showers and waterless urinals. So here we see a low flow shower head, and the EPA actually has this logo called WaterSense that they use to certify that this particular fixture uses less water. And they do things like have the water come out faster or they aerate it, so it still feels like a lot of water coming at you, even though it's not necessarily as much. Yes, there is actually such a thing as a waterless urinal. Here's kind of an older picture, but the animation here shows what happens. So literally, it's a porcelain unit here, and it's got a pipe that goes down. You don't want to just have this pipe being open, otherwise sewer smells can get into the room. So some of the organizations that make these waterless urinals have this blue oily liquid on top, the blue seal liquid they call it, so that when urine is placed into the urinal here, it's actually denser than the blue oil, so it actually travels past the oil here, up and then down into the sewer. And because you've got this blue seal oil here, that prevents any sewer gases from coming out and causing bad smells in your bathroom. Now, something else I'd like you to consider is the sustainable use of non-renewable resources. And I know this sounds a little odd. How can a non-renewable resource be used sustainably? And what do we mean by non-renewable resources? We mean oil and minerals and raw materials and things along those lines that once they're used, they are gone. Well, you can take the profits or the advantages of a non-renewable resource and use them to promote the use of renewable resources. So for example, an oil company, if they were to take some of the profits from drilling up the oil and sending it off to market, and use some of those resources for things like solar collectors, for wind turbines. And this is just smart business, because once the oil is gone, or once all of the easily accessible oil is gone, then you have solar farms and you have wind farms, and you can start making profits from these types of things. So you still have the ability to make money when you're not doing the oil or you're not drilling up the oil anymore. So that's smart. So the main focus of our presentation today is to talk about practical things that we can do to help solve environmental problems. For our final project, we had people talking about specific things that they can do, and I'm going to build on some of those suggestions in this presentation, and maybe talk about a few more too, so stay tuned. In terms of water, you can do things like eliminate leaks in toilets and pipes. They say, you know, when your toilet runs, after you flush it, every once in a while it continues to run a little bit, you hear it, you can lose up to 300 gallons of water per day. Now that's money that's water that you have to pay for. And a little something else to consider is, in order to get that water to go into your house, you have to pump the water up into those big water towers. And the water towers use gravity to pressurize the pipe so that the water flows. So you pay utility companies for the water, they're paying money to pump the water. So if we can cut down on our water usage, that's going to mean money saved for you. That's going to mean less energy used. Minimize watering of lawns. So as I am recording this in the spring, we are still getting plenty of rain, and I'm not thinking about watering the lawn. I imagine most people aren't either. But in the summertime, I know some people like to water their lawns. If you do that, water at night or early in the morning. Because if you water at noon in the middle of July and the temperature's 95 degrees Fahrenheit and the sun is shining, a lot of that water is going to evaporate before it gets down into the roots. So you want to water when evaporation is going to be lower. You also want to make sure that you position your sprinkler in such a way that you're not putting a lot of water on the driveway or on the sidewalks. No matter how much you water that, you're not going to grow grass there. Have you ever seen anybody just sweeping the driveway with their hose? So they're a little too lazy to break out a broom and sweep it, so they just wash it. Well, that's very, very wasteful in terms of water use. Another thing to consider is planting drought-resistant plants, or planting what's called a xeriscape. So a number of years ago, my family and I went to Arizona, where we have some family, and we rented an Airbnb. And if you notice, it's Arizona, it's a desert. So very nice plants that were planted in the landscaping, but what are they? They're desert plants. So we got some cacti here. We have some other drought-tolerant plants planted around, and it looks really nice. Now in Illinois, we want to plant things like prairie grasses, and you can see there are a number of different prairie grasses over here. They've also planted a couple of gymnosperms here that are also fairly drought resistant, and then they laid mulch down. Okay, all of these things cut down on the amount of water that we would need. We talked a little while ago about using low flow fixtures, but low flow fixtures can sometimes be expensive, especially when we're talking about things like replacing a toilet. So we used to talk about what we called the brick trick. So you take the overflow tank in your toilet and you drop a brick in it, gently please. And that would displace some of the water in the toilet so that it wouldn't fill up as much every time. But the problem with that is bricks are made out of clay, and if they're in water for a long period of time, they just break down into lots of icky nastiness that's now in the inside of your toilet. So instead of putting in a brick, put in like a half a gallon jug filled partway with water. Make sure you arrange it in such a way that it's not interfering with the mechanism of the toilet, and that will displace some of the water so you won't be using as much as well. Some other things to do would be don't let the water run while you're shaving or brushing your teeth or cleaning the vegetables. And turn down or turn off the water when you're in the shower and you're lathering up. And I know in the wintertime this can be a little cold, but believe it or not, you're probably not lathering up for too terribly long. And there's our little jug of, it's blue food coloring, and it's a half-gallon jug of water, but you get the general idea. New toilets are pretty cool. Here's an article that was in CNN about Kohler Company, just up in Kohler, Wisconsin, not too far from us here in Lake County. This particular toilet has got two buttons on it. One is yellow and one is brown. For yellow, it would use less than a gallon of water, 0.8 or 0.9 gallons of water for liquid waste, and 1.6 gallons of water for solid waste. I think you know what I'm talking about there. That's kind of interesting. I had a student take a picture of a low flow toilet handle. So it says here you pull up for liquid waste, so that would be using less water. You push down for solid waste, it would use a little bit more water. Although I would recommend that you don't take pictures in the washroom. They generally look down on that. Something else you can think about doing is using passive or low energy cooling. Okay, for one thing is you can use light colored houses, because remember, albedo is the ability to reflect light. So light colored houses are going to be more likely to reflect the light back out into space. That means your house isn't going to absorb as much energy, which means your house is going to be cooler, which actually saves you money in the summertime because you don't have to spend as much money to cool it. You can use blinds or tinted windows again in the summertime. That's going to help keep that sunlight energy from getting into the house. Now the advantage of this is in the wintertime, when you want that sunlight to come in and passively warm your house, you can open up the blinds and let that sunlight energy in. Planting trees or shrubs next to your house or your building. In the summertime, the leaves from those trees are going to absorb the sunlight and do photosynthesis with it and protect your house. In the wintertime, when the trees lose their leaves, at least if it's a deciduous tree that loses its leaves, in the wintertime, they lose their leaves, so more of that sunlight energy is going to strike your house and actually warm you up some. You can use roof vents and ridge vents. So in the summertime, it gets really hot. I don't know if you've ever gone up into an attic before in the summertime around noon on a hot sunny day, but it gets really dangerously hot up there. And if that heat builds up in your attic, that heat can make its way into your living spaces too. So by putting in things like a roof vent or a vent on your ridge here, this isn't one, but it would be here called a ridge vent, that's going to let some of that heat out of your house. That's going to make it cheaper to cool and more comfortable for you. Ceiling fans. Ceiling fans are great because you can turn off the air conditioning at night, especially when people aren't awake, but you can have the ceiling fans on during the day. And you might spend only 10 cents per ceiling fan for the night to cool a house, whereas you would spend several dollars worth of electricity on an air conditioner. Another thing is turn off lights. Now, we're tending to go in the US away from the incandescent lights. We're tending to go towards the LED and compact fluorescent lights. But the old-fashioned lights, I know there's still some of them in your house. Incandescent has as candle as its root word. That means it gives off heat. If you ever look at an old light bulb, the filament has electricity going through it so much that it heats up, and it heats up so much it gives off light. If you've ever tried to unscrew a 100-watt bulb after it's been on for a while, you won't do it very long because it's really, really hot. So switch to LED and compact fluorescent lights because they give off less heat. Or if you have incandescent lights, turn them off when you don't need them because they're heating your house, which in the wintertime or in the summertime you would then have to spend more energy to cool it. And then here's a real low-tech way of drying your clothes. Hang up a clothesline. Wintertime, maybe not so easy. But in the summertime, think of all the electricity and the gas that you're spending on dryers. And if you can cut down on that, good for you, and it's good for the environment. Green roofs are something kind of cool. So the last 15 years or so, there's been a movement towards planting plants on roofs. And you can't just go up on the top of a residential house and throw some seeds. It doesn't work that way. But there's a lot of advantages to having a green roof. Here we see in the upper right-hand corner, this is actually City Hall in the city of Chicago. Really neat picture here. You look where the pointer is right here. Let's pretend this is an old-fashioned roof. Well, what did they do on old-fashioned roofs? They would put blacktop on there to make it waterproof. So whenever it would rain, the rain would fall down on the roof. The rain would collect and go down into a sewer system. And with all these concrete streets and alleyways and all the roofs here collecting water, it wasn't uncommon for the sewer system to be overwhelmed with a big rain and couldn't handle all of the water. And actually, they would send the extra storm sewer water into the sewage sewer system, and that would overflow to the point where it would go into Lake Michigan, and it was just awful. So in a green roof system, here you can see they're actually planting native plants. You have to invest a little money in this. So you need to have a waterproof barrier so that you're not getting the water into the building. Then some thermal insulation, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And then several other layers before you finally get to your soil with your plants. Now, what's the advantage of this? Well, the soil here is going to be absorbing some of the water for the plants. As a result, you're not sending as much water into the sewer system, which makes your city more efficient. By planting plants here, the leaves of these plants are going to be absorbing sunlight. So that sunlight isn't striking your roof, because what would happen if it was a blacktop roof? Low albedo. They would absorb an awful lot of heat. That heat would then have to be gotten rid of, so you would have to have very expensive cooling systems. By planting plants here, you're actually decreasing your amount of cooling bill in the summertime because the plants here are preventing as much sunlight energy from getting into the building. And on top of it all, take a look. This is really beautiful. This is a place for people to walk around during the day, kind of take a lunch break and get a little taste of nature. These also provide habitat for native organisms, so birds and insects can live in here. So it's really, really cool. And this kind of leads us to this concept of reconciliation ecology. Reconciliation ecology is the science of inventing and establishing and maintaining new habitats to conserve species diversity in places where people live, work, and play. There's been increasing interest in planting things like butterfly gardens. So taking an area and planting some native plants. So this is a really pretty New England aster here. And by planting aster and butterfly weed and milkweed, which is one of the big food sources for the monarch butterflies that you see here, we can have insects. And don't forget, bees are really important in things like pollinating our agricultural crops. So you want to be able to support animals like bees when they're not doing the work for us. So butterfly gardens like this are really neat. Here you can see in the lower left-hand corner, this is a feeder, actually several feeders that I have. This was in the wintertime. There's a birdhouse down here, or a bird feeder down here with seed. This is what's called a suet feeder. And coming to the suet feeder at the same time, I had two different species of woodpeckers. This is a red-bellied woodpecker, and this is a hairy woodpecker. In the summertime, I still have the seed feeder, but I also put up an oriole feeder for real pretty orange and black birds, the orioles. And this is a hummingbird feeder, and this is a gorgeous hummingbird here. This is a ruby-throated hummingbird. I couldn't think of the name for a minute. You notice the wings are a blur. Well, they can beat their wings over 300 times per second. And it is a really pretty thing when I can see those hummingbirds coming to our feeder. So the key to reconciliation ecology is admitting the fact that humans are a part of the environment and we're doing things to the environment for us. And that's okay. But it takes very little effort to hang a couple of bird feeders. And if you're going to plant some landscaping, it doesn't take an awful lot of energy to choose native plants to plant. And those simple, easy choices can help provide habitat for native species that actually benefit us in the long run. So this could be something like your house. Thinking bigger could involve parks or green roofs or forest preserves. The options are limited by your own creativity. Okay, some other energy saving tips include things like when you're choosing major appliances, choose Energy Star appliances. Energy Star is a certification by the U.S. Department of Energy that certifies that the appliances that you're choosing use less electricity than other standard devices. And if you're making a selection for a device, it doesn't cost you any more money to just take an extra few seconds and just buy products that have the Energy Star logo on them, because they are certified to be more efficient with electricity, and in the end, that saves you money. Some other things to think about include using microwave ovens. Microwave ovens use between 20 and 50% of the energy of stoves or ovens in order to cook the same material. Use programmable thermostats to avoid heating and cooling your home when you're not there. So I have this programmable thermostat in my house. In the wintertime, during the week when people are at work and at school, I have the temperature of the house go down to 65 degrees. Our two dogs have a fur coat. They're fine. It's then programmed to bring the temperature back up to 70 degrees Fahrenheit about a half an hour before we come home. So the house is comfortable when we're home and making dinner and cooking and all that fun stuff. And then at night, when people are asleep and all tucked in their beds and covered up, the temperature goes back down to 65. There's no reason to heat the house when we're not there or we're not awake. In the summertime, same thing. When we're home, the house stays cooler, but at night or during the day when we're not there, the temperature goes up. And as a result, we're not there, we're saving money. And at night, we've got ceiling fans or box fans. So we're still cool, but saving energy on the cooling bill. It's important to replace your furnace filters regularly. Um, those get clogged up with dust and debris, and your heating and cooling system then has to work harder in order to move air through those plugged up filters. A little something else I want you to think about is a tankless water heater. So the picture on the left that you see here is of a typical home water heater. It generally has a tank that holds about 40 gallons, and there's natural gas or an electric heating element here, and it's going to heat the 40 gallons up. If there's nobody home during the day, the heating element turns off and then the temperature goes down. But once the temperature goes down to below a certain level, then it heats it back up again. So you've got this constant heating and cooling of the water. And if there's nobody there to use it, you're essentially spending money to heat water that's not being used. Now, this is kind of exciting. This is called a tankless water heating system. So you have to plumb it a little differently. But essentially, you've got the cold water coming in from the service line, and here you can see cold water coming in from the service line, and then there's 1, 2, 3, 4 heating elements here. So as the water travels past the heating elements, the water is heated on demand as it's needed. That heated water then travels out through the rest of the piping system to your house, so when you turn on the faucet, hot water is going to come and be heated directly. So in the end, you're going to be using less energy to heat the water, and you're not needing to heat it over and over and over again. Here's another problem. If you have multiple people in your house, have you ever run out of hot water because you use the 40 gallons? Hey, tankless water heaters won't run out because, again, the water is heated on demand. Now, when these tankless water heaters first came out, there have been some reliability issues with them, and they cost a little bit more to have a plumber come in and do the plumbing for them. But I am told that the reliability has been getting better. So this is something to keep in mind when you're choosing or when you're building a house. Transportation. Please walk or ride your bicycles if it's possible. City of Chicago has gotten really good at putting up these divvy bike stations, so you get the app and you essentially rent the bike to go from place to place, or, have a bike of your own. We did a lab where we talked about air pollution. So use public transportation when possible because that's cutting down on the number of cars on the streets. When it comes time for you to buy a new vehicle, when you're talking to the salesperson, tell them that you care about getting a vehicle that has better gas mileage. If salespeople report to the car manufacturers that consumers want to get vehicles that have better gas mileage, they're going to produce vehicles with better gas mileage. Consider using a hybrid vehicle. So a hybrid is a car or a truck that uses gasoline, but it also generates electricity through the process of stopping and starting. And that electricity also helps to power the car. So it powers an electric motor in your car. So hybrid vehicles get much better gas mileage in general. Here's an email from a student. I know it's getting kind of old now, but a former environmental biology student was motivated by us talking about this in class, and she got a Honda Insight. And this was part of the email from the student. And I thought it was great. She loved the car. The response when I showed this to other students was, it's not really attractive as far as vehicles go. So hybrid cars are ugly and boring, right? No, not necessarily. So in the upper left-hand corner here, we see the Honda NSX. That is a hybrid. Right-hand side, this is the BMW i8 concept car, which is a hybrid. Down below, here's a truck. Now, this is a little bit older, Silverado, but hybrid trucks get way better gas mileage than the non-hybrid trucks, and they still look just as cool. They look just as tough. How about the Ferrari? How about a hybrid Ferrari? Yep, they're making them. And then this car is cool. This is Tesla's Roadster. This is not a hybrid. This is an all electric car. But it's clocking 0 to 60 in 1.9 seconds with a top speed of 250 miles an hour. This is not some old sedan here. This is not the Honda Insight we saw a picture of a few moments ago. The problem with electric cars is that if the electricity is produced using fossil fuels, then it's not really sustainable. So how can we make electric cars sustainable? Well, by producing the electricity in a sustainable way. So this is actually a wind turbine that's small enough to fit on a house or a small building. Here are some solar panels that are on a house. So if you're powering your car using renewable energy, all of a sudden your electric vehicle is now renewable or sustainable. And here I wanted you to check something out. I think this is kind of cool. This is from the Tesla company. So this is the group that makes those Tesla vehicles. Here we go. Not only, well, they're not going to do that. Not only are they making electric vehicles, but they are building batteries and home charging systems. These are not roof shingles. These are solar panels. So the Tesla company, and I'll show you the Honda Corporation too, they are actually integrating solar panels into the house, and they don't look like you're putting solar panels on there. And the solar panels are generating electricity, which is stored, which can then be used to charge your vehicle. So that's pretty cool. Come on now. But here's something even cooler. So Honda Corporation is now trying to find a way to integrate the car into the house. So this is a picture from inside an experimental house they have in California. And I want to show you a short little video that goes into this in greater depth.
The purpose of the Honda Smart Home is to think about environmental technology and how it will influence the homes of the future. A future where there's a lot of solar power and a lot of electric vehicles. As great as these technologies are, they can create disruptions to the electrical grid because they can cause relatively rapid changes in the net demand for electricity. The Honda Smart Home uses an energy management system that works with the grid to minimize these concerns.
We're the California ISO, and what we do is we balance the demand of 80% of California with generation, thermal generation, solar generation, wind generation. Every second of the day, somebody here in California is turning on a light, starting up a manufacturing project, and what energy management does is it watches all those little bumps in the energy picture and it balances those two things out.
It's great that solar power for homes is growing so quickly, but this can create an issue for grid operators because solar power fluctuates through the day. It's a challenge that's likely to increase in the future.
So the frequency in North America is 60 hertz. What the frequency tells you is that your grid is balanced. Your generation and your load are matching. We have to balance the load and generation at 60 hertz at all times. So this is our typical load curve, and what this is showing you is the blue line is our forecasted line. We see a lot of solar resources now, rooftop solar, and that's new for the energy industry. However, when cloud comes over or it's a rainy day, all of a sudden now that solar goes off. Well, looking ahead, some of the bigger concerns is having flexible resources that can really move fast when that load starts to come back up.
A demand response event is when, typically on a hot summer day, the utilities ask customers to reduce their energy consumption to avoid stressing the grid. The Smart Home's energy management system can listen for these requests and cut power if necessary, or even send power back to the grid. Smart Home is also thinking about how to turn electric vehicles from a grid problem into a grid solution.
You run out of battery in your car right at the peak, and you go home and you plug in your car, and all of a sudden that's adding more load to our system right when we're just trying to make all the other peak loads.
Whenever the FIT EV is plugged in, the system can decide how to charge, and if necessary, it can be used to help stabilize demand on the grid. Here at the Honda Smart Home, our energy management system is able to control our vehicle charging load, as well as our solar production, to coordinate with the needs of the grid.
How cool is that? So in the original house here, it was relatively small house, but they have this energy management system in there. So they have solar panels on the roof, they have low electric fixtures, and the car actually becomes part of the charging system for the house. So the electric battery in the car actually becomes a backup battery for the house, and they can manage when they are charging the car, and as a result, trying to take a little bit of stress off of the overall electrical grid. So this is the thinking outside the box stuff that we're going to need to do that still gives us our high quality of life, but it's going to allow us to address some of these environmental problems that we've been talking about. This is kind of cool. So here we see companies like, this is Chevrolet here. It's a Chevrolet dealer. They're actually building solar charging stations. So it used to be, I don't know if this is still the case, if you would purchase a Chevy electric vehicle, you could just come by and plug in for free. This is kind of interesting. So here is a Chevy S10 pickup. I used to have one very similar to this. But they've converted this to run on vegetable oil. Vegetable oil, biodiesel. You think, oh, well, you know, what kind of vehicles are going to run on biodiesel? Well, here we see a S10 pickup doing 155 miles an hour. So these vehicles can be cool. They can go fast too if we want them to. Human population control. Attempt zero population growth. Okay, we see population is increasing in much of the developed world and in the undeveloped world too. But we're the ones that have the resources to help decrease population growth. So in my family, you know, we decided to have 2 children for my wife and I. So the population hasn't increased as a result of us. And we now foster a son. So to get another child, we did not add to the population. We're just helping take care of one that was already there. So this is going to involve assistance and education for everyone, but especially those in less well-developed countries, as we discussed in class. Oh, and by the way, there is such a thing as a vegan condom. So one of the ways that we can decrease our impact on the environment is to not eat as much meat. Well, here's a group that realized that condoms are made using casein, which is a protein in milk. So here's a company that figured out a way to make condoms without using the milk. So it is a vegan condom. And I know I say this to people and it sounds kind of odd, but remember, the business environment that we're in now, if you can find a market for products that people will spend money or spend a little more money for, the smart people are the ones that are going to jump onto this and find a way to meet the needs of the people who want to find ways to be more environmentally friendly. In business, buy your products from companies that have good environmental policy. So if you're trying to find a pair of sneakers, or if you're trying to buy a vehicle, if you're trying to buy groceries, okay, spend an extra few minutes and find companies that use sustainable sources for their materials. Find companies that use less packaging. Here are some pencils. The pencils are made from recycled denim in jeans and jackets, okay, that would have otherwise gone to a landfill. When you're buying, try to buy things that were recycled or made from recycled materials. Remember that recover means to buy recycled stuff. So purchase things that are made from recycled materials. Purchase your things from companies that don't pollute, that use safer access to raw materials. Believe it or not, you can buy toilet paper and paper towels that were made from recycled paper. Here, this group's seventh generation, they're actually advertising here that their tissue, their toilet paper is 100% recycled, and you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. This is kind of interesting. So Google, the company, has vowed and say that they've reached 100% renewable energy use for their global operations, including their data centers and their offices. So they've entered into an agreement to buy solar energy from a farm in Iowa for powering all of their equipment. I think that's pretty cool. Businesses, also when you're buying products, try to buy fair trade products. Fair trade products are going to be labeled with this label right here. And you can find fair trade coffee, fair trade sugar, and bananas, etc. So the Fair Trade Organization certifies that products that are produced, generally they come from underdeveloped countries, but they don't necessarily have to. But it ensures that the people who are making these products are paid a fair wage. And hear me out here, because I know this means that they'll be a little bit more expensive. But when people are paid a fair living in order to make our products, they don't have to have many more children because they will have enough money to support themselves and their family. They will not have to pollute because they just have to. You know, they will have a vested interest in protecting the environment because it's going to support them and their families. And although these products do cost a little bit more, generally it's not a tremendous amount. Okay, we're going to promote the use of alternative energy sources. So wind power, solar power, fuel cells, geothermal. This is kind of exciting. Solar and wind hybrid systems. So thinking outside of the box is going to be really important. So I showed you the Honda house a few minutes ago. You know, they're coming up with systems in houses that have both solar panels and wind panels. Solar panels going to be able to work during the day and when it's sunny out. Wind generation is going to occur at night and when it's windy. So when it's stormy out, the wind is going to be generating more power. When it's sunny out, the solar panels. Either way, putting this into a house that has a management system so that you can use the electricity. And then don't forget what I told you before, any extra electricity that is produced goes out to the grid. You receive credits for that. So it actually makes you money if you generate more electricity than you use. This is kind of cool. So there's a group that's trying to grow algae in the facades of buildings. So the outside of buildings have these tanks for growing algae. That algae can then be harvested and used for biofuel on panels on the outsides of the buildings. And here's the last little thing I want to show you. So this is a German company. These glass panels that you see here are actually tanks that are filled with water, and they cycle water and bubble oxygen through here, and that is for the algae. And the algae that are produced, let's see, I can scroll down, here's kind of a side view. The algae would be in this tank, and they're bubbling the water in here to help stir the algae up and to give them the oxygen that they need for surviving. So it's important that we're going to find strategies for solving these environmental problems that think outside the box. So we're going to need to do things like grow algae in our buildings. We're going to need to have smart homes. They're going to help us address these problems without really requiring us to change our standard of living. I can't impress upon you enough the importance of practicing the 4 R's. Reduce, use less stuff. Reuse, use things over again. Recycle, anything that is recyclable that your local recycling center will take, you need to send to the recycling center. and then recover, which means buy recycled stuff. And if we can keep this going, we're going to reduce our demand for natural resources and protect the stuff that we have, and make sure there's a market for the recycled stuff. The Solid Waste Agency of Lake County, SWALCO, takes a variety of different things for recycling. We talked earlier in the semester, they'll take medicines. They're also very big at electronics recycling. So they've got 4 different places in Lake County where they will take your recycling here. Buying recycled products is good. So I took this picture at a Subway, and they were advertising the fact that their salad bowls and catering trays are made with 95% recycled content. Okay, they're proud of this. And I will preferentially go to Subway if I'm in the mood or my family's in the mood for a sub, because I know Subway values recycling. So see, we're rewarding Subway for having good habits, and I still get my subs. I implore you to vote for leaders who value sustainability. I am not going to tell you one party is better than the next. I'm not going to get into that. That's not my place. But I hope that when you are voting, and we could be talking presidential elections, we could be talking for state leadership, we could talk for local leadership, please take some time and investigate the candidate's environmental policy and make that part of the equation that you use to decide who you're going to vote for, because your vote matters. And young people that I'm talking to, there's actually more millennials now than there are baby boomers. And that is probably going to be the case with our next generation coming up too. I ask you to support environmental causes. So give of your time going to forest preserves and helping to pick seeds for prairie plants. Donate money to environmental causes. Work in your park districts. Help to teach people about the environment, because people don't want to save the black swallowtail butterfly or the sandhill cranes unless they know what they are and know how beautiful they can be. Get involved in lake and stream cleanup activities. Work for social justice. It's not fair that landfills always go into the least wealthy communities. If you've got some money and you're going to go on vacation, ecotourism is spending money going to places where the people then take the profits and use them to live. Now, the benefit of that is then they have an advantage for helping to protect the environment that they are living in. So I mentioned before I took a cruise on the Inside Passage up to Alaska that was absolutely gorgeous. Some of the money that we spent on the excursions helped to support the people who live there, and they'll want to provide these tours and these services for cruisers in the future, so they'll help to protect the environment. Here's some pictures from Maui, Hawaii trip I took a number of years ago. We went whale watching, we went snorkeling, good times. Please remember what you've learned in this class. We can make a difference. So go out into nature, take a walk in the forest preserves or the state natural areas. Tell your friends, you don't have to beat people up over this stuff because nobody likes the Enviro-Nazi, but talking to people and making sure they know why these habitats are important and why they're worth protecting in a nice, gentle way is a very good thing. Show them by example. So if you're at a friend's house or you're at a party and you've got an aluminum can or a glass bottle, instead of saying, "Where's your recycling?" Ask nicely if they have a recycling container, because that might just be the thing that gets them to realize, hey, maybe I should have one of these. And then please teach people about what you've learned. Teach the children. These are my kids. It's one of my favorite pictures. This is in the front of our house. And if you look closely, besides my son giving my daughter the bunny ears, what does my daughter have in her hand? It's a garter snake. So one of the problems with having a dad being a biology teacher is you learn to pick up and play with critters. And here's a picture of my wife when my son was much smaller. We would carry them around in the backpack containers. Here we are at Illinois Beach State Park, and we used to go to Volo Bog all the time. Here's something my daughter did for Martin Luther King Day. They were given an assignment to fill in I Have a Dream. So my daughter, this was completely unscripted by me, but I am so proud of her at 8 years old. She said, I have a dream that the earth will be cleaned by not littering, no trash. Now remember, she's 8. And people throw their trash in garbage cans. So even at 8 years old, she saw the importance of being able to protect our environment. Questions? Problems? Difficulties? I know I said that a lot during the semester. Congratulations, ladies and gentlemen. You are finished with the notes for this class. Thank you for all of your hard work. Now study hard for the final and make me proud. Take care, everybody.